The Pittsburgh Pirates are about to enter a massive stretch of games over the next 4 series. We're going to talk about why it's massive and the potential impact of the outcome after these games are done on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. My name is Ethan Smith, bringing you your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan and love bringing that fandom to you every single day here on this show. Folks, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, as you always do. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app to get ready to go wherever you want to go this summer, or wherever you want to go whenever, because Booking.com is absolutely awesome. And the Pittsburgh Pirates were off yesterday. We were not. We talked about Martin Perez and his return that he'll make tonight against the Atlanta Braves. And on today's show, we're going to talk more about that Braves series and aiming for 3 straight wins. We're going to talk about keeping Jared Jones and Paul Skenes ready and healthy throughout the season. And, of course, we're going to talk about why this stretch of games that they're about to get into is going to be so big, because the trade deadline's almost here. It is, folks. It's almost here. It's right around the corner. The All-Star break is right around the corner. This season has flown by. I mean, absolutely flown by for all intents and purposes. And we are entering the final series of the month of June, a month that has been very kind to this Pirates team. You obviously look back on it with series wins against the Dodgers. You get a series win against the Twins. You had that rough series loss to the St. Louis Cardinals. Big series win against Colorado, 2 big series wins against Cincinnati. So they've had a pretty good month. Things have went well for this team. And they're still very much in this crazy, insane NL wildcard race that features just about every single team in the National League, not named the Marlins, the Rockies, the Dodgers, the Brewers, and the Phillies right now. So it's a very interesting time, because when you look at certain games and you start looking at the schedule, and yeah, you can look ahead. It's fun. It's fine. You're allowed to do it. You start looking at some of these games that the Pirates are going to be playing, and you really, really start to see the competition ramp up a little bit. Obviously, they head to Braves country this weekend to take on the Atlanta Braves, a team that they beat in a series earlier in May, near the end of May. And then after this is where things get very interesting to me, because you play a St. Louis Cardinals team that you would like to beat this time around. That series will be in PNC Park, so you get the home field advantage. You then play the New York Mets in a 4-game set, albeit the game Saturday on July 6th, but that's a big series as well. The Mets have played very good baseball as of late since Grimace threw out the first pitch. I know that's not the only reason why anymore, but they've played a very good brand of baseball as of late. You then play the Milwaukee Brewers again in a 3-game series, and then the Chicago White Sox just before the All-Star break, before returning home to face the Philadelphia Phillies. So these next 4 series in particular, the White Sox series kind of included, I guess. We'll get to that when we get to that in a couple weeks. But all of those games are against teams that the Pirates, rightfully so, need to be competitive with. You look at this series against Atlanta. Atlanta doesn't really directly affect what the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to be doing as far as the wild card is concerned, seeing as they are in the NL East and not really chasing them in any right. The Braves will more than likely be that first wild card team that you see coming out of the National League, even despite the losses of Ronald Acuna and Spencer Strider, which we'll get into more when we preview the series in the next segment. But then you have St. Louis, who you're right there with right now. As far as the standings are concerned, St. Louis got blown out by the Cincinnati Reds last night. Pirates trail them by 2 games. If they could keep that pace going into next week, that series becomes huge, because then if you win 2 out of 3, which seems to be what the Pirates have been doing as of late, then you find a way to start shrinking the gap. And the gap has been shrunken a little bit, as Milwaukee only has them by 6.5 games. So then if you go into that series against Milwaukee and you can find a way to win that one too, then things start to kind of get rolling a little bit. And then you, of course, have the Mets, who the Pirates are right alongside right now. The Mets are 39-39 at the time of recording. The Pirates are 39-41. So they trail them by 1 game right now and are just behind St. Louis and San Diego as far as the wild card structure is concerned. So you look at all this and you say, okay, Ethan, you're being a little optimistic about talking about beating these teams. So that's the positive spin on this, is that the Pirates go into this 12-game set and win, let's say, 7 of 12, right? I think that's a pretty good, reasonable thing that this Pirates team can do, because that's about what kind of team they've been. If they can go 7-5 over these next 12 games, that would place them directly at 500 with, you would assume, depending on how everything works out, wins against the Brewers, wins against the Cardinals, wins against the Mets. That's a big deal. And wins against Atlanta as well. Now, on the flip side, they could easily go 4-8 or 5-7 in this stretch. That would really change some things, because then you're dropping a little bit more below 500. You're kind of falling out of grace. We've seen that from teams so far, like the Washington Nationals, who, albeit are still 3 games out of the wild card race, have fallen off a little bit. The Cincinnati Reds are 38-43, and the Cubs are 38-44. So you're kind of seeing some of these teams fall down a little bit. The San Francisco Giants, another one of those teams that's now 3 games back. The Pirates have placed themselves in a good spot, though, atop this NL wildcard race. And when you look at this and you have these 4 teams that are in the playoff hunt and likely will be for quite a while, the Cardinals, I'm still iffy about. The Mets, I'm still a little iffy about as well. But as it is right now, these are massive games. And I gave you kind of 2 realistic outcomes that I could see. I think this Pirates team could win 8 of 12 here. It's a very reasonable thing to think that they could do that, especially if the offense can carry over some of that momentum that they just picked up in Great American Ballpark against Cincinnati going into this series against Atlanta. They could easily go 5-7 and drop further below 500, because I think that should be the goal going into the All-Star break for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, is find a way to just be 500. And that will be enough for those 4 days off before you then have to play a very tough stretch of games against Philadelphia and a bunch of the West Coast teams, as well as the Diamondbacks, which will be a whole nother thing. But that's looking out way too far. So you look at these series and you say, okay, the Pirates have already beaten the Braves in a series this season. Ronald Acuna played in that series and got injured in that series, so they will be without him. The Brewers, they've struggled with a bit. They split a series with the Brewers and lost a series with the Brewers this year. That's the team that's kind of the benchmark right now in the NL Central. They are the team that removed themselves from the pack that has played good baseball all season. As I mentioned already, the New York Mets are a team that right now is in it. They're a team that you need to beat. They are a team that you've lost to already this season. So you want to get your get back on that point. And then you have the Cardinals, a Cardinals team that you've already lost to. So this is a massive stretch. And the outcome after these games could really kind of shape how this team is going to attack the trade deadline. I don't know how much impact it will have. Obviously, the Pirates have to have some idea of what they're doing at the trade deadline already, seeing as where they are. But the thing with these standings and how crazy the wild card is right now, all of this can change by the end of this weekend against the Atlanta Braves. The Pirates could sweep the Atlanta Braves and be an above 500 team, or on the flip side, they could get swept and be 5 games under 500. That is the kind of team they are right now, where every game is precious, especially in this race for the wild card, and it's going to continue to be that way. That's why you look at stretches like this where they're playing 4 playoff hunt teams that are likely going to be in the hunt through the rest of the year. This is a massive stretch, much like I spoke about the massive stretch that they had against Chicago, Milwaukee, and Chicago in May when they brought up Paul Skenes. That was a massive stretch. They handled it. They did well in that stretch, and they found a way to beat Chicago in a series, although they lost the first two, and they managed to stay afloat. That would be the bare minimum of what you want them to do, is stay afloat after this stretch is done. But it's going to be interesting how this stretch shapes what they do moving forward. Now, again, these are teams they can beat. These are teams they can lose to. We're just going to have to watch it play out. But it's no doubt one of, if not the biggest stretch left in the season. Now, I'll obviously probably say that again later this year, depending on how things shape out. But at this current moment, it is a massive stretch, not only for the Pirates, but for the teams they're playing too. So sit down, get your popcorn, and watch, because it is going to be fun over the next 13 games. Of course, this stretch starts in Braves country. The Pirates, of course, head to Atlanta to take on the Atlanta Braves. I'm going to preview this series with you, as well as talking about how the Pirates can get their first 3-game winning streak since very early in the season. So we're going to discuss all that here on the Locked On Pirates podcast in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Because this episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. And yes, we're talking about even your rival cities like Cincinnati, St. Louis, Milwaukee, and Chicago, with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival's city. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now, because I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs winded down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I really want them to everywhere. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. And really, like Brian Reynolds, keep making the most of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And folks, don't forget to check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you're getting your news and analysis of everything going on in the sports world from the local host of Locked On, like myself, every single day on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV. You can also listen to Pirates games, much like this weekend series against the Atlanta Braves, on the SiriusXM app. Just type in Pirates, and you'll be able to listen on the go. Pittsburgh Pirates, of course, will be taking on the Atlanta Braves today at, I believe it's 7:10 Eastern time. I do not remember the start of the game. I know it's a night game in Atlanta, thankfully for all those people in Georgia. I would know how hot it is down there at the end of June in Georgia. So make sure you wear your sunscreen. Make sure you bring lots of water and hydrate if you're down there in Georgia going to go see the Buccos play the Atlanta Braves. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, this is a team that the Pittsburgh Pirates have already beaten this season. They beat them 2 out of 3 games when they came to PNC Park. It was a series where the Braves were kind of playing a lot better brand of baseball than they have as of late. Ronald Acuna and Spencer Strider, 2 of their biggest, arguably best players on their roster, both injured right now for the rest of the season. So the Braves still kind of in a figure it out mode, kind of with those guys out. And you look, shout out to Michael at Steel City Pirates. By the way, love his work. He obviously helps a lot at Steel City Pirates. Did the series preview today and brought up a very interesting statistic for these teams. Pittsburgh, since that series against the Atlanta Braves, is 14-12. So the Pirates, again, playing a pretty good brand of baseball as of late, just above 500. That's about what they've been since Paul Skenes debuted. Meanwhile, the Braves, 14-15 in that same stretch. So since that series at PNC Park, teams have been kind of close, but the Braves, of course, under 500 throughout that stretch while the Pirates are playing a winning brand of baseball. And really, when you look at this series, I think the biggest takeaway that you're going to have right away is this Braves offense. It's an offense that has been a very good offense. And despite losing Ronald Acuna, it's still a team that ranks 15th in home runs, 13th in home runs, 15th in runs scored. And you look at what they've had going in this year. I mean, they were a very potent team last year. Now, obviously, a very much more healthy team last year, but they haven't really been able to replicate that. I still think that the biggest matchup that you're going to see in this series is going to be the Pirates pitching staff against the Braves offense. It's still an offense that features Matt Olson. It's still an offense that features Sean Murphy. It still features Austin Riley. Jared Kelenic has had an interesting season with the Braves since coming over from the Mariners. Michael Harris Jr. is always a lethal option. Ozzie Albies. So they still have a very solid team in Atlanta that can do very good things for them offensively. And for the Pirates, it's going to be two lefties and a righty going for them in this series. If you watched my show yesterday, you know who's starting tonight. It will be Martin Perez, who will be tasked with trying to get the Pirates a win, their third straight win for the first time in a while. It's been a minute for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but Martin Perez, 57 and a third innings pitched, 4.71 ERA, 46 strikeouts to 19 walks. The whip a little bit high. Obviously, a lot of that inflated from that outing that he had against the Milwaukee Brewers. And the Pirates tonight will be facing an old friend in Charlie Morton, who is still going strong in Major League Baseball. 4-4 record, 79 and a third innings pitched, a 4.2 ERA, 80 Ks, and 35 walks with a 1.3 whip. Meanwhile, it will be Paul Skenes and Max Fried going on Saturday. We all know about Paul Skenes and his brilliance. 2.14 ERA, 61 strikeouts to 8 walks. But Max Fried, folks, 90 innings pitched, an even 3 ERA, 80 strikeouts, and 27 walks. We saw the Pirates a couple weeks ago, well, about a week and a half ago now, struggle against a lefty in Nick Lodolo, who had a very good outing against the Pittsburgh Pirates in that stretch. So you kind of get a little worrisome about this, where you wonder, how is a strong lefty like Max Fried going to perform against this Pirates offense, which is usually pretty good against left-handed pitching. Fried, though, is on another level, arguably their best pitcher this year now with Spencer Strider out. So you have to wonder how that's going to go. It'll then be Bailey Falter and Spencer Schwellenbach, I believe is how you pronounce his name. One of the rookie pitchers that has come up for the Atlanta Braves, a 5.40 ERA, 25 Ks and 7 walks in 26 innings. Bailey Falter with an even 4 ERA in his 83 and a third innings. So very interesting pitching matchups that you're going to see in this one. You get Charlie Morton and Max Fried first, who are very good pitchers in their own rights, but the Pirates are going to have to find ways to attack them. I think this is going to be another series where the runs are going to be ample and the Pirates offense is going to have to score. We saw that in the Cincinnati Reds series, where they had 10 hits in all 3 of those games and were able to outscore the Reds in those final 2 games. They're going to have to do that again against this Atlanta Braves team. It's a Braves team that really, truthfully, is still very good. They're going to be a playoff team. They're still a very well-constructed roster, and the Pirates beat them before. They pitched very well against the Braves in that prior series that they played at PNC Park, and they're going to have to do it again. And you kind of look at what else is missing right now and what's been going on. Marcell Ozuna is a player I want to watch. Marcell Ozuna and really the outfield. And I know Ozuna DHs, but I want to watch the outfielders and Marcell Ozuna from the Atlanta Braves here. Ozuna has been very good against left-handed pitching this year. He's very solid against it. So that means he'll be in this lineup no matter what, those 2 games with Perez and Falter. Meanwhile, Michael Harris, though, a lefty, there are a ton of lefties on this team for the Atlanta Braves that I think the Pirates can neutralize. Ozzie Albies is the switch hitter, usually much better on the left side than he is the right side. You look at Matt Olson, who is very good really on both sides, but you want to neutralize that guy too. And of course, Michael Harris, you want to neutralize him as well. So I want to see what this Pirates team can do. Again, I think the biggest thing that you look at, especially tonight when you're looking for a 3rd straight victory, hopefully Martin Perez comes off the IL and looks more like the Martin Perez that we saw earlier in the season, especially in April, than the one we saw right before his IL stint. And the Pirates are going to have to score runs. You're going to hope that Brian Reynolds can continue to carry this offense. You hope that O'Neal Cruz can have a big series again. You start to hope that some of these guys that we would been relying on really over the last couple of months, like Connor Joe, Rowdy Tellez, who we've relied on a lot in June, and Nick Gonzalez can also have big series. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be a big matchup. Somebody has to win it. And I think the Pirates, if they can find a way to neutralize this Atlanta offense somehow with the pitching that they have this weekend, they have a good chance. But the offense is going to have to score runs in this series. You may have noticed something about the starting pitching this weekend for the Pittsburgh Pirates with Skenes going, but it's also Martin Perez and Bailey Falter. Jared Jones hasn't pitched since Saturday. So we're going to talk about why this is important to keep Jared Jones and Paul Skenes both ready, available, and healthy on the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Do you want to go to Bucco Luau weekend next weekend? Well, I am, and I used Game Time. I'm going Saturday to get the Bucco Luau shirt anytime that I want to go see Paul Skenes. I head to the Game Time app, find the section that I want to sit in, and get the best tickets, because guess what? My purchase is always covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, and I get that lowest price guarantee, which if I find something cheaper somewhere else, Game Time will credit me 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off, and download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And thank you guys always for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And your Pittsburgh Pirates have 2 rookie pitchers right now in Paul Skenes and Jared Jones, who are fully involved in the Rookie of the Year conversation. But these are guys that have had a heavy workload so far. Skenes obviously came up about a month and a half after Jared Jones did. Jared Jones, of course, breaking the team out of camp. And these are guys that right away, yes, we have been dazzled by what they've done. They have improved and looked great in every single outing that they've had so far this year. And you continue to look at it and say, okay, what do we think is going to happen as the season continues? Because both of these guys have never worked this much before. These are guys that their workload is as high as it's ever been. So you look at this weekend, for instance, and we haven't seen Jared Jones pitch on Saturday against the Tampa Bay Rays. He had a pretty solid outing after a bad first inning. Obviously, with the walks being a big issue in that game, still found a way to have a very solid outing. Paul Skenes, we know about Paul Skenes. He's going to be phenomenal. He's going to be great. But if the Pirates want to be a team that can get to the wild card or get into the playoffs somehow or be in the race in September, they're going to need these guys to be healthy. They're going to need these guys to be fresh and ready. So you're going to see the Pirates kind of have this scenario where they're going to push these guys back or skip over or start every once in a while because of that workload. Now, to some people, of course, people who watch baseball back in the day, you'd be wondering, why can't they do this? Why can't they throw? Why are we investing time if they can't do it? It's just something in baseball now. And every team has to do this with their young pitchers. Every team has to monitor the innings that their pitchers are being thrown. And if you listen to my post-game show that I did after the Pirates beat the Reds on Wednesday, I spoke a lot about this when it came to Luis Ortiz and why he could be very important for the Pirates in being able to do this, because Jared Jones and Paul Skenes, folks, have never went over 120 something innings in any point of their professional career. Jared Jones obviously spent more time in the minors, but we saw the Pirates ease Paul Skenes into the process last season and going into this year with Indianapolis. He didn't pitch all that much because they wanted to save his innings. You can make the argument as to why he wasn't up here already to get some of those innings, but I would also argue that apparently whatever they did was right because he's been absolutely phenomenal this year so far. So you look at all this and you say, okay, you have Keller, who has proven he can handle the workload. Bailey Falter is a guy that is a workloader. Martin Perez can do it. You also have a guy in Luis Ortiz now who can come into games and start for you and look impressive when he needs to. And then eventually you're going to get Quinn Priester back. I think Braxton Ashcraft is going to get called up at some point because he's just going to have to be. Because this team is going to need those innings thrown, and you don't want to throw out Jared Jones and Paul Skenes, because if you have to shut them down later in the year, much like we saw last season with Johan Oviedo, it's going to complicate things, especially for your potential playoff run. And you don't want those guys to throw their arms out completely, because then they do that and the whole dynamic changes. The pitching suddenly is not the strength that it has been throughout the season if Paul Skenes and Jared Jones can't go. So if it means skipping over them for a start or two over the course of the next couple months to make sure that those guys are ready, healthy, and available come September, it's something the Pirates are just going to have to do. And you're seeing it with Jared Jones, because one thing you'll notice with Jared Jones over his last couple starts, his velocity goes down a little bit as he goes deeper into those outings. And he doesn't look as dominant as he does later in those outings as he has as of late. Could it be fatigue? Could it be the league pushing back on him? It could be a mixture of both. And I think you're going to eventually see that with Paul Skenes as well, although Paul Skenes frame-wise is a much different pitcher than Jared Jones as far as how he's built and all these other things. But I wouldn't hit the panic button on stuff like this. The Pirates obviously have a plan for this. They're going to probably have an innings count that they want these guys to be at to make sure that they're fresh, ready, and available. And it's something that they're going to do throughout the season. But be thankful that they have guys like Martin Perez, Luis Ortiz, eventually Quinn Priester, and maybe even Marco Gonzalez that could help all of this work out. And eventually it will, because these guys are going to get used to the workload and really throughout the rest of their career be able to handle it. Folks, enjoy this weekend series between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Atlanta Braves this weekend. We'll be back on tomorrow's show for a special Saturday edition of Locked On Pirates to wrap up the month of June, where we're going to look back on the month of June, of course, with the Atlanta Braves series still going on, but we'll still look back on it and all the other stuff that we'll do. We'll also preview Paul Skenes against the Atlanta Braves and so much more on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Again, my name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms because it's free and available to you all the time here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side. Man, the Pirates have some really awesome pitchers. I absolutely love it.